Call on the Parliamentary Secretary, the member for East End, to say prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Parliament now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name, and for the safety, honor, and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth II, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established amongst us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Premier, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers of Cabinet, ex officio members, members of the Parliament, the Chief Justice, and members of the Judiciary, that we may be enabled to faithfully perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask in thy great name's sake. Let us say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance unto us and give us peace now and forever, always. Amen.
Please be seated. This Honorable Parliament now reconvene this business.
Administration of oaths or affirmations.
None.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of messages and announcements.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Presentation of papers and reports.
None.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in respect of the order paper, today there are motions and questions listed which we would like to move to the end of the order paper. And I would, in that context, I would move a motion for in accordance with Standing Orders 14.4, to change the order of business on the order paper, to move the questions set out in 6 and the motions set out in 11 to the end of the order paper. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Question is that the order paper be rearranged so to allow government business to continue. All in favor?
Aye.
Those against?
No.
The ayes have it. Clerk.
Statements by the Honourable Ministers and members of the Cabinet.
Statement from the Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning to note that this week the Caribbean community and indeed the world Well, I've got two to do. Wait. Mr. Speaker. Born witness to a tremendous moment in history as Barbados has become a republic, swearing in Dame Sandra Mason as its first president, therefore replacing Her Majesty the Queen as its head of state. On the eve of the 55th anniversary of its independence from Great Britain, Barbados has, for the last time, lowered the Union Jack in the presence of His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, and affirmed its political maturity and great aspirations as a nation by taking this major step forward. Barbados, Mr. Speaker, has always played a central role in advancing the cause of the Caribbean community. And I think of the great contributions of Grantley Adams, who, as Premier of Barbados, was chosen as the Prime Minister of the West Indies Federation, albeit short-lived. We should also recall Barbados' first Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Errol Barrow, QC, who expressed the deepest desires of a post-colonial Caribbean in the following way. I think that we in the West Indies should not be afraid to speak our minds, and I think that we in the West Indies should not be looking around for somebody to lead and work out our own political and economic philosophy. In taking this monumental step to become a republic, Mr. Speaker, Barbados is certainly not looking around for someone else to lead. In fact, Barbados has been blessed with many exemplars and gifted leaders who have helped to lay the groundwork to become a republic. I think of the great economic mind of the late Honourable Owen Arthur, who was a powerful voice both regionally and internationally. Many current and former members of this Parliament had the privilege of considering the late Prime Minister, Honourable David Thompson, a friend and an esteemed colleague as well. Mr. Speaker, I am certainly proud to consider the current Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Mia Mottley QC, a dear friend. We can all be proud as a Caribbean people of her articulate and passionate thought leadership as the world navigates threats to democracy, the climate crisis, inequality, and the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In all of these things, Mr. Speaker, she has been a beacon of light and inspiration. Having recently returned from COP26, myself, I can personally attest to the impact and influence she has had on that global forum, ensuring that these key issues do not remain an academic or tick the box exercise, but that the impact on us, small and developing communities, are considered and indeed addressed. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to encourage us, rather than viewing this as some sort of move away, to consider Barbados a republic, becoming a republic, a giant leap forward. While no longer one of the realms of Great Britain, Barbados remains a member of the Commonwealth of Nations. And of course, it will continue to play a central role in CARICOM. This is an important statement and moment for all democracies around the world. Barbados, Mr. Speaker, can truly be described as a friend to all within the region, and on this higher platform of being the world's newest republic. I am confident that we will continue to see Barbados take an even more significant role in using their voice to shed light, especially for the smaller nations and territories around the world. On behalf of the people of the Cayman Islands, of the government and the people of the Cayman Islands, I wish to extend warm congratulations and the very best wishes to the government and people of Barbados. And to the many Barbadians, or as we affectionately call them, Bajans, who have made the Cayman Islands home and contributed so much here, sir. We fully appreciate your abiding sense of pride and excitement as Barbados embarks on this new journey. Our links and ties to Barbados remain strong, and we're grateful for the positive impact that the Barbadian community has had and continues to have, again, on the Cayman Islands. May God continue to bless and prosper the good people of the Republic of Barbados, and may history consider this the ushering in of a new era of excellence for Barbados. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thought it appropriate briefly to make a statement this morning in light of the elections in our neighbor Honduras, the presidential elections, which had a very interesting outcome. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the government and people of the Cayman Islands, I wish to offer congratulations to the people of Honduras on the election of their first female president, Xiomara Castro. The reports of a high voter turnout, active engagement of civil society, and peaceful participation during voting are all welcome signs of the desire and commitment of the Honduran people to the democratic process. As you are well aware, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands has strong historical and familial ties with the people of Honduras. And today, we wish to assure them of our best wishes. The election of a female president is significant, and it points to the positive enhancement of one of the most important nations to the peace, stability, and security of the Central American region. So, Mr. Speaker, let us wish our friends and neighbors in Honduras every success, and I once again wish to congratulate President-elect Xiomara Castro on her victory. May God continue to bless and prosper the good people of Honduras.
Personal explanations.
None.
Obituary and other ceremonial speeches.
None.
Raising a matter of privileges.
None.
Government business, bills, second reading, continuation of the debate, appropriation financial years 2022 and 2023 bill 2021.
Continuation of the debate on the budget. Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? The Honorable, the Minister of Financial Services and Social Development.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning again, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to contribute to this debate on the appropriation financial years 2022 and 2023, Bill 2021. To do so is truly an honor. I continue to pinch myself as I sit on the government bench in Parliament, as I walk these hallowed halls and think of what a blessing it is to serve. I often walk the halls quietly while others might be having a dinner break and just look at the photos on the wall and think of all of the former members and the decades gone by. And I often think about the challenges that they wrestled with that were the issue of issues in their time. What challenges and problems kept them up late at night? And then I think about future generations. And if I'm so blessed that my photo is on that wall, what will they say about me? How will they view my contributions? So, with all that I can and the strength that I can muster, I will try to make positive contributions as long as the people will have me here and the good Lord gives me strength. And in thinking it from that vein, I'm also going to try every day to conduct myself professionally, because that is the matter that is in my complete control. No matter what other events come along, plans get disturbed, unforeseen circumstances, the best of intentions, at a minimum, I would like future generations to look upon me and say he carried out his affairs with honesty and integrity. Mr. Speaker, I took a leap of faith when I entered electoral politics with no designed backup plan. And thus, I have to believe that the Lord led me here. And to that end, I want to thank all of my family and friends and the people of West Bay South for believing in me. In particular, my wife Tiffany, my son Jackson, and my daughter Savannah for their support every day. They are my rocks, and I know I would not be able to do this job without them. Mr. Speaker, as per the Constitution of these islands, I have been charged with responsibility of the conduct of two ministries. One styled the Ministry of Financial Services and Commerce, the other styled the Ministry of Investment, Innovation, and Social Development. So I would like to thank the Premier for having the faith and confidence in me that I would be able to manage such awesome responsibilities. But, Mr. Speaker, for the purposes of this contribution, this poses an interesting dilemma, because I reread the standing orders, and it's not 2 hours per ministry, it's 2 hours per member. So I have to decide how much I can economically use my time to cover such vast space. So that led me to thinking about how I'm going to actually approach this debate. Whether I go through every department and every ministry line by line, reciting budget figures, all of which will probably be ventilated in Finance Committee anyway. Do I go through the litany of examples of the challenges that we face? You know them, Mr. Speaker. Just to name one, the person who's running around from department to department trying to complete an application document, bouncing between government administrators just to get indigent health care coverage for a loved one who's in the hospital with cancer, waiting for the email to say that they will be granted coverage 3-4 weeks later. But I don't know how much purpose it truly serves to go through every example, and we know those challenges. Besides, Mr. Speaker, I'm an optimist. So I don't want to be tarred with the doom and gloomy brush. But I think it's fair to say, Mr. Speaker, that I find myself not quite tracking the opposition's case in this debate. One moment, there's a claim that the premier is too gloomy, and aside from a few quibbles, everything is fine because we're adopting all of their ideas. And in other moments, it sounds like it's doom and gloom, the sky is falling, run for the hills, we can't make it. Which is it? But at the same time, I also don't know if that approach works, for us to just continue trading blows. Mr. Speaker, you know it, I know it, the Caymanian people know it. The Progressives' time wasn't perfect. Nobody's perfect. Yes, there are good foundations. But as former Prime Minister Winston Churchill said, it is said, and I quote, "It is said, reap where you have sown." That is a hard rule, a stern rule, and we accept it. But we are not reaping where we have sown. We are reaping where others have sown. Where they have sown weeds as well as grain. And Mr. Speaker, that means that there will be a balance. But I don't know that it serves the country much value to just put forward points purely with the objective to secure political advantage. I think what the country is hungry for and yearning for is far-sighted, solution-oriented leadership. So instead, Mr. Speaker, I don't know if my approach will be correct, but I would like to share my vision, a summary of my vision of the challenges in the area of social development and the prospects that I see of a vibrant economy, even if it means there will be a few months of rough seas ahead in the short term. As you know, Mr. Speaker, my journey through government has been multifaceted. But one of the areas that has touched me the most, that has my stern and heartfelt commitment, which is rivaled only to what I feel for my family, is bringing advancement in the area of social development that is sorely lacking for our people. Our people need to see a change here, a change that they can touch, a change that they can feel. Many governments have come to this very fork in the road, and budgets have been trimmed, slashed, numbers picked out of the sky for the basic necessities of our people. Now, the Deputy Premier can tell you I stood my ground when it came to this budget. I recognize the pressures that he's under, that he has to meet certain financial targets, that he has to put forward prudent financial management, and that hard choices need to be made. I also understand the assertion that private sector activity is important for growth. However, with widening income inequality, generational poverty, global automation, impaired access to housing and property ownership, these matters require government solutions. So, Mr. Speaker, I had to say to the deputy peer, no more. No more can we trim this side. You have to go find it someplace else, not this way. So we stand here as a government ready to embark on transformative change. And that is what the Ministry of Investment, Innovation, and Social Development is about. I've said it, but I think it bears repeating on breakfast shows that, to my mind, how I see it, the ministry is a vehicle. Investment is what is going to drive the economy. The innovation is that fuel that's going to get the engine going from investment. And the passengers are the people who are in social development. So does that mean in that vehicle that there will be instruments from the former model that we'll use in this one? Yeah. Will that mean there'll be some instruments from the former model we won't use? Probably not. But it is a new model and a new way of thinking of how we're going to create that virtuous circle. Mr. Speaker, you also know all too well the machinations of conducting business through public service. There are frustrations, there are stresses. And that point reminded me of another quote from John William Gardner, who was the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under former President Lyndon Johnson. I quote, "I must report that even excellent institutions run by excellent human beings are inherently sluggish, not hungry for innovation, not quick to respond to human need, not eager to reshape themselves to meet the challenges of the times. In this case of our civil service as it relates to social development, I believe that sluggishness can be shaken and vigor can be restored with adequate resources. Adequate resources cost money, which means adequate budget. Now, the member for Georgetown West is quite right in asking not to have empty promises. He is correct. But that's precisely why we're gathered here today, to debate the appropriation bill. The difference between campaign rhetoric and delivery is the budget. For me, Mr. Speaker, it's not a financial document. It's a values document. It is to say to the public that the items we care so much about to deliver to you, we've assigned a monetary sum in the column next to it. And we did that in order to provide the opportunity to facilitate its achievement. I witnessed past ministers and councilors make sincere efforts in social development, but they were outdone and overmatched without sufficient resources. That was a weed. The country is therefore presented with this opportunity, with this budget, to provide the resources necessary to radically and transformatively change our social development infrastructure. These plans would have immediate improvements on the Needs Assessment Unit, Sunrise Adult Training Center, and the Department of Children and Family Services. Let's start with transformation of the NAU. And when I refer to a plan and transformation, it's going to be thorough and it's going to be innovative in form, legislation, and appearance. Foremost, Mr. Speaker, even if it is by sheer force of will, and the last thing that I do We are going to repeal and replace the horribly titled Poor Persons Relief Act and replace it with modern financial assistance legislation that requires benefits in exchange for work for those who are able. And work won't just mean traditional employment. It'll mean any valued community service. Drive a bus to transport seniors, clean up the beach, deliver meals. Our aim is to have that legislation ready for consideration by this Honorable House by the end of Q1 2022. It'll also, even if it sounds like a small point, change the name of the department to the Financial Assistance Department. And Mr. Speaker, I think I can speak on behalf of Parliamentary Secretary Heather Bodden, the member for Savannah, when I say that we are willing and able to take up the offer from the member from Georgetown South, who I thank her for her comments yesterday in relation to my experience in this area. I think what the country wants to see here on this legislation is to reach across the aisle and work on it together for all of our people. If there's one piece of legislation in this country that should demand bipartisan support, it is financial assistance for our people. So I'm happy to sit down, share the draft with you, go through the provisions until we get this right. And even if we go through the first iteration and that takes a year and we find things we have to course correct, we'll come back again until we get it right. Mr. Speaker, I also, with the support of Parliamentary Secretary Heather Bodden, want to change the look of NEU, the physical look of NEU. Want to change the reception area to an expanded premises where there's a comfortable seating area. I don't know how many members of this House have actually walked into NEU. Have you walked in? You can't hardly fit in the first place. It's tight, it's hot, it's cramped. And how would you feel walking in that you're on your last legs asking for help and you can't sit down? No private confidentiality, sharing your business through bulletproof glass. That cannot be right in a country of these resources, even with our challenges. We want comfortable seating, a play area, and also make it more comfortable for the staff in there to be able to have the freedom to do their work with new IT tools so they're not shuffling paper. A few of them know that I'm also in innovation and I was a little skittish at first and said, no, you're not going to lose your job. The IT that we want to put in will help you to do your job easier so you can stop paper pushing and then get to studying the root causes to help our people. So we already embarked on this journey. We've changed the website. The website now is able to be manipulated on mobile phones and just sitting at a desktop, because our studies show that most of the clients operate with mobile phones. We've also now about to embark, and hopefully it is done before the end of the year, a completely online application. So you no longer have to email in documents. You can type in all the information, you can dot in all the information on your phone, send it through, which stops paperwork on the other side for the employees that uploads to their system and gets the process started more quickly. I also have a particular concern, and I gave the example at the outset that I want to work with the Minister of Health on to reshape the application process for indigent health care coverage. Right now, the system is absurd. The client bounces between the needs assessment unit to the hospital, back to the needs assessment unit, that gets checked by the Children's Department of Family Services. I remember being on staff and taking it to the former premier to sign, and he even looking at it and going, I shouldn't be signing this. This is a health care call. We need to amend the Health Insurance Act to change that definition so it's signed off by a medical professional rather than the minister responsible for social services. we also need, in this budget, is to provide more officers. NEU has been begging for more officers for years. And what that is going to do is speed up the service. And let me say this to them, I know that they get a lot of flack in the press, and sometimes they may do things that may be slightly off kilter, but it's because you're under stress. You're in a job where you're hearing everybody's worst problems every day. I know what happens. I've had a job where I was a dishwasher. You get upset. You start running things through halfway because you know the boss has more money to give you more help and you got to do twice the work. That is then having an impact on our people. We've got to give them more resources. And Mr. Speaker, the same follows for the Department of Children and Family Services. Right now, the director estimates that the caseload per social worker is 1 social worker per 90 cases. Not 19, 90 cases. There is no human being that has the cognitive capacity to keep up with all those cases with intricate social problems. And then we expect that the domestic violence stats will go down? Really? So this legislation this budget is trying to get closer to the international standard, which is 1 to 35. I did my best with the Deputy Premier to try to at least get this down to 1 to 50 so that we can start to show how that can make an improvement for our social workers. There's also a need to modernize the adoption legislation, the children's law, and other policies that they operate under. They are also, the Department of Children and Family Services, very ably assisted by hardworking folks in the nonprofit sector. The problem is the sector is pretty segregated. They are not all working to one unified strategy for desired outcomes. The ministry staff have already begun to coordinate them and develop a strategy to get them working together, because we have no idea whether one organization is dropping off 3 meals at House A and House B is getting none. Mr. Speaker, this next one is closer to you and I, to the member for West Bay Central and the member for West Bay North, but to all of us, frankly, the Sunrise Adult Training Center, which is a department created that is in West Bay that is designed to provide integrated services to adults that are differently abled. To say that the facility is inadequate is an understatement. It is busting at the seams. The sad thing is when you visit the facility, those differently abled adults are ready and willing to work. And they just need that helping hand to be income-producing citizens of this country. Sunrise, also because of its capacity limitations, has a wait list. So that means that there are differently abled children graduating from Lighthouse School who can't get to the next level. And they're sitting there, and that's putting pressure on their parents to who are getting no respite services and are stymieing their potential. The situation is unacceptable. And this budget will move Sunrise out of West Bay into a centrally located, more spacious facility that will also help the eastern districts. This one is also something that's near and dear to me. I'm sure every member of this House gets these calls from the person who cannot get assistance from NEU in time, is displaced from their home, can't find a landlord to rent to them, and any used stock of hotels that are willing to rent to their clients is shrinking. That person has nowhere to go. Our ministry is going to take a stock of all of the Crown assets. We have our sites, at least on the first one in West Bay, the Waymakers home across from Scholars Park, to turn that into transitional housing. So that jam that that person finds themselves in, where they need that 3-week breathing space, to find shelter somewhere before an apartment, or if the Minister of Planning gets his way, we have some social housing included in his affordable housing to get them into shelter more permanently. Now, here's the strategic point. Although you might see a rise in the budget for social development than in prior years, the strategy being deployed is that if we can get the data, attack root causes through the Department of Family Services, get folks back to work, or at least on benefits in exchange for community work, we should then, over future budget cycles, see a decrease in the budget for social development. So this is an investment. Now, turning to innovation. Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, I listened to an interview from former President Bill Clinton when he was asked about the challenges of political leadership. And he said, you come into office with your objectives, you come into your office with your budget, ready to go. Unforeseen circumstances, he described it as incoming fire comes in that throws you off course from your objectives, but then you still got to keep a mind for what's coming around the corner, the things that you have to prepare the country for in years ahead of the budget you're working within. Mr. Speaker, we now live in a world where a car can drive itself. But in reality, it's a computer that's driving the car. So let's think that through for a moment. A computer can now see the world, make decisions, communicate, and actually execute contracts. I mean, this last point is important because if a computer can now enter into contracts, understand the terms, and do the agreement, we are marching years ahead to a world where now computers will supplant people. We now then have to then prepare our people for the digital machine economy. In the 90s, we saw a world, Mr. Speaker, that had the introduction of the internet. The 2000s saw a world that had the beginning of commerce on the internet. And the 2010s see a world where the internet is in the pocket of every person. Look at all the people on their phones now who could be communicating with people all over the world. That also drives a massive online communication of social media, online learning, streaming, communication apps. There's a network. The internet is simply a global network of computers that are in your pocket. The next decade, beyond this one, is going to see computers march and march onto the workplace. But I don't fear. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm an optimist. Cayman is in an amazing position to capitalize on these future trends. As computers continue to automate many parts of the economy, I believe our economy can be pivotal in this. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to confirm to the member of Georgetown North that I will press on with the digital ID program for the future and bring necessary legislation to bring that to fruition with the aim of that being the end of Q1 of 2022. But the digital ID is just the beginning of Cayman's potential. Cayman can layer its world-class regulatory and legal framework to march into sophisticated financial technology, fintech. And you heard a bit about it yesterday, Mr. Speaker, from the member of West Bay Central, as she is going to be taking up the charge to continue moving forward the virtual assets framework with the Monetary Authority. And that's why this budget also has to give SEMA additional resources to upgrade their technology to be able to regulate in this environment, which will be completely different. Cayman can also leverage its sophisticated accounting and risk asset management industries to capitalize on the rise of computer assets. Computers will be able to create novel asset classes that will transcend any singular market. This also touches on something that we might not even see coming. Cayman has an amazing and vibrant art and cultural community. Can now see how we can unlock and distribute and monetize these assets at a global scale through programmable commerce. So I look forward to working with the Minister of Culture and the art community to develop a whole new line of commerce and draw activity to the island, because there are artists who want to come and share and spend with our artists, and those collectors will spend money on island. Mr. Speaker, on a similar vein, this is why the Minister of Tourism mentioned film and a studio. Even 5-6 years ago, Cayman could have not been in any real serious competition for film work. If you look at movies like Lord of the Rings, series like Game of Thrones, we don't have large mountains and hills and valleys that are usually looked for by studios. But technology is changing that. You can now have a digital studio on 4 or 5 acres of land that can then project any scene that you want in this world or out of this world. That means that Cayman has the ability to leapfrog into the studio business. And young Caymanians are coming up to learn how to do post-production, all right here in Cayman, which opens up at a completely different level of education, opens up a completely different level of income and opportunities for our young Caymanians. So this is why I have to commend nonprofits like Code Cayman that I came across when I was a deputy chief officer, and they came at this sort of fancy idea to teach computer coding. Initially, at the time, it was when I was in charge of gender equality policy, and I thought I would give it a chance and go down. When I actually began to study what they're doing, they're teaching not just women of all ages, but young Caymanians for free how to computer code. The reason that's important is because it's a job that's borderless. It can be done anywhere. And it's a skill that our young Caymanians can need to get ahead of to get forward to the future. So I look forward to bringing these ideas over to the Minister for Education to see how we can begin to integrate that in the future. I also look forward and thank the Deputy Governor for getting me involved with the Civil Services Innovation Collaboration Cafe, which is a cross-ministerial set of civil servants that meet from time to just brainstorm on the biggest ideas to the smallest ideas of how we're going to get moving forward. Whether we should go the route of Barbados and have electric buses, whether we should go the route to have continued home working to ease on traffic, from the biggest to the smallest ideas. But specifically, Mr. Speaker, to just touch on for a moment the departments that make up innovation, formally, which is the Computer Services Department, the Cybersecurity Unit, and the E-Government Unit. Joining them under one ministry is very exciting. The E-Government Unit not only has plans for the national ID to just identify us in the room, it also wants to use it as a business tool to ease the burden of KYC that goes on between banks. And it's very, very difficult, everybody would recognize, to change banks these days. Contrary to popular Hollywood opinion, it's not easy to open a bank account in the Cayman Islands. And not even when you're Caymanian can you switch as easy. This tool will be able to provide not just ease of access, time saving to our people, freedom of choice in the market. It also has the ability to help with the KYC requirements of our investors and make Cayman on the cutting edge of this technology. And it's the E-Government Unit that I must place a special mention, who is helping the Needs Assessment Unit modify their website and modify their technology. The departments are beginning to see the value of that collaboration, that link between innovation and social development. Mr. Speaker, I also want to mention, particularly, I think the Deputy Governor should take note of this, is the Computer Services Department. They are the unsung heroes of the civil service. The COVID experience for the civil service could be very, very different if you didn't have an efficient computer services department. So I thank them for their service. And that enabled enough of a proof point to put money in the budget to grant them essential hardware and software that they need to continue their valued service. And, Mr. Speaker, I have now seen, turning to one other unit, the cyber security unit, now sitting in the National Security Council, now more than ever see the value of that unit to protect us now as we move into this digital space from cyber threats. There's a whole other world of danger out there. This is one of those items in the budget that I feel is just a definite. Without them, if we get attacked, it's game over. They are there to protect and defend the Cayman Islands. They are essentially our cyber police. Now, investment then has a natural link from innovation, and I hinted to it earlier in terms of film and tech. But the other interesting side of film, and this is what I'm looking forward to working with the Deputy Premier on in his capacity as Finance Minister and the Minister of Tourism, is films are sometimes attracted to other jurisdictions that have a direct tax rebate. We, of course, have an indirect consumption model. In order to attract those productions, I'm very, very excited to develop some sort of program that carves out our rebate based on our indirect tax model, which shows the world that we do have a tax system, it's just different, and still be able to attract the same set of business. But in terms of attracting business, I think what we have to keep in mind, and this is what I stress to the ministry and Invest Cayman, the new department, is that we need to find investment opportunities that are not just profitable within themselves, but are profitable to the community at large. So they make money, but they also benefit the community in a real tangible way. And I see that combination in a couple of projects, and there are others, but there are some that are well on their way that just need that extra government support, like Cayman Enterprise City. This is a development that's not only there to attract tech, but also build an entire community around it. I am very excited to see their plans unveil, and there are others in the pipeline. There's also a nonprofit called Green Space that wants to create a health and wellness park in Georgetown. And myself and the Minister for Lands went out and took a look. This is the kind of development, nobody's against development, but what you want is development that's not unbridled and able to help all of the community. I heard the member for Georgetown North raise a potential concern about the Business Development Center, the Center for the Business Development, not just becoming an ATM. I'm sensitive to that point because I don't want that either. I've seen tremendous successes come from their incubator program where they're taking young Caymanians, giving them the opportunity, the tools and the mentoring to bring their business ideas to the market. We need to invest more in that department to get those other returns, that intangible return, to see the smile on a Caymanian face who brings a product to market. But that doesn't mean that in the meantime, while there are tougher months, we should not continue as much as possible business stipend grants. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn now to financial services and commerce. The vision that we have set forth for this ministry is to be recognized as a global center of excellence in financial services. And recent engagements that the governor referred to in his throne speech in attending JMC in London and then going to Brussels have reinforced in my mind why we have to engage early and often, and even when there's not a problem. I think one of the weeds that we have to course correct is I think that there's a view in Europe that Cayman only comes forward to engage when there's a problem in legislation, where there's an obstacle we're seeking to navigate. We have to get beyond that. We have to engage in sustained dialogue. It's not their job to know us. It's our job to educate them about us. So we need to be proactive. We can't just sit and wait for legislative changes or legislative proposals that we know are coming around the corner, that you can see building 2 years away, sitting and trying to hope it doesn't happen and backing yourself into a corner, only to get down to legislation being passed in a hurry with strained consultation and different parts of the industry arguing with each other. We need to identify these global trends. We need to get ahead of them, design them for ourselves, so when they come, we are in place and ready to go. We do have a challenge. One of the weeds is that we are on the FATF gray list. And that has a knock-on consequence, that being on that list from January of this year to being automatically listed on the EU's AML list. But I am very, very encouraged by the plan that has been set forward by the Ministry for Financial Services in conjunction with the Attorney General, the National Coordinator, the Anti-Money Laundering Unit, of a 3-point plan to address the 3 reasons why we are on the FATF gray list. 1 is already complete. We're chipping away at the 2nd reason, and we have a plan for the 3rd. So in the event that we are not off of the FATF gray list before the EU strikes its list, we then hopefully are in a position to make the case to the EU that the reasons that we used to be on the list are either nil or very little, so we would try to put forward the argument that you've lost the rationale to put us on your list. But in my discussions in Brussels on Friday the 19th of last month, Friday the 19th of November, even if that were to occur, what I wanted to understand is if that does occur, how do we get off the EU AML list? And we had very engaging dialogue of how they were willing to meet with us, work through what other difficulties they see, to give us the opportunity to take the appropriate measures and course correct to get off their list, because I wanted to make the point to them that Cayman does not seek to illicit finance, does not seek unsound business. We seek to be a global partner, not a global problem. And as far as I could see, they were receptive. This is why I can't really subscribe to the view that some people say certain regions should just be written off because you're not getting business from them. At the end of the day, the world's gotten smaller, Mr. Speaker. These regional bodies also sit in other international organizations that we have to communicate. So there's no running from them. The only thing that you can do is to have dialogue as a mature democracy through diplomacy and constructive dialogue. Mr. Speaker, shifting to tax matters for a moment. I'm surprised no members on the phone when I say tax. This is interesting. So you all are interested. You're not on your phones. I won't bore you too much. But it's relatively simple. Our position as a country is that taxes should be paid where they're owed. We've never wanted anybody's tax money. We're not trying to take it from them. So we believe the global tax measures that support and trying to address global problems are correct. I felt a sense of greater understanding when I've joined OECD Inclusive Framework working group calls in which the global minimum tax proposal is discussed. And it's interesting because you're on a Zoom call with 130 countries, and you can see that it's not necessarily that they are trying to target any particular country because they don't like you. It's much more macro than that. They see widening income inequality themselves. They see global climate change. They want a unified tax code that they can rely on to have the funds, as we're here talking about the budget, to address those problems. We need to help them with that, not run away from it, because we have nothing to hide. So my response into those tax measures is that, which is a good thing that our Department of International Tax Cooperation already sits in these groups and has regular dialogue, is that we need to feed in to the rules as they're being made so they understand our regime and the rules are tailored accordingly. Now, Mr. Speaker, on specifically the issue of the global minimum tax, there are two pillars. One is in relation to digital tax. Cayman is not really in that business, so that one is largely not of huge concern to us because that's not our model. Pillar 2, which puts in the global minimum tax of 15%, our analysis is that there is limited impact. One, because that is targeted towards multinational enterprises, and we don't seek that business. Our business is more institutional, so there's a limited amount of entities here. Number 2, we don't have the double taxation agreements that other jurisdictions have, which is causing the friction that they're concerned about of how you can trade your tax position. We don't have that. Our products are tax neutral, which is why in Pillar 2, our investment fund regime, which is one of the bread and butter of Cayman's financial services, is carved out from Pillar 2 and unaffected because its tax neutrality is recognized. We now have to be able to explain that same model in other products to the world so they can see that actually Cayman is not harming us. If there's an entity here and they're required to pay a top-up tax in another jurisdiction, so be it. If we now enter to the tax fray and charge our own tax, then we're taking money out of their mouths. All we want is to facilitate capital going through and create tax revenue in other countries. We're happy to receive ours indirectly through fees. So there's nothing to fear, Mr. Speaker. In fact, one of the meetings that I had in London from a top investment funds association said, look, I had done an interview for this association. And the UK branch said, look, things are tougher because you're not as well understood in Europe, but you're more understood in the US. So the US chapter said, say to the minister when you see him in London, from the US perspective, Cayman is fine. We understand. We know the business. We know it's regulated. We know it's proven. We know it's tried and tested. So the future, in my opinion, and what I've seen so far, is optimistic, Mr. Speaker. But there's one shift in strategy that I think needs to occur. The other weed is that there has been a lot of regulatory legislation coming at industry from all over the place. But we need to get back to the strategy that the Premier, when he was the financial services minister, deployed, where we had a balance of the regulatory and the commercial activity legislation so that industry gets a bit of both. So they're happy to, well, happy might be a strong word, they are managing regulation, but they also need work that's going to help to improve the economy, keep Cayman cutting edge, have good news to say to investors, because they swallowed a lot. And bless them and all the regulators for what Caymans have to do to prove itself. But the proof is in the pudding, Mr. Speaker. In this session, my maiden bill of legislation, fatefully or coincidentally, happens to be a new part to the company's law for restructuring, insolvent, and liquidations, which is a piece of legislation or proposal that I was working on the staff under that minister between the 2013 and 2017 administration that has just sat on a shelf, and I cannot believe I'm sitting here for me to pass that. So we need to get back to that balance, that complement between regulatory and business, sound business. So there are more enhancements on the way. We have enhancements in the pipeline for next year to enhance our Insurance Act, Trust Act, Companies Act, Exempted Limited Partnership Act, so that industry has more products and tools to be proud of and generate stronger business. We also have to look carefully into the area of green and blue finance. So yes, Mr. Speaker, we've seen the reports of trying to get the Commonwealth Climate Growth Fund to fruition. But that, as a tool in itself, is a strong symbol. But I hold the belief, and the ministry will be working with the Monetary Authority, that there are already investment funds registered here that are already in that business. We need to tell the world that story, that Cayman, that is our contribution to the war on climate change. We, in and of ourselves and our capacity, if we go and do all the wonderful things of carbon neutral, solid waste, which we all need to do, the world might still look and say, given your size, that doesn't really make a dent in the overall world of climate change. So when I attended the JMC with the governor, the challenge from the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, was how are each of you, as overseas territory, going to do your part in climate change? If Cayman has mastered bringing in investment funds to the market that are recognized as tax neutral, we need to be able to carve out and identify who's in that space to tell the world that story so we can explain our tax model in a setting that the world can actually understand, and then develop that product even further so that we become the home of that here. That is a natural avenue for the Cayman Islands financial services industry to grab the bull by the horns and jump on it. Now, Mr. Speaker, you'll also see in this budget that we're going to be pushing for increased IT to manage workloads in all of the regulators and the departments, because we need to be able to make the conduct of business easier for industry and also make the assessments done by the regulators in the department more efficient. Now, I heard, Mr. Speaker, a charge last night of silence. It's interesting because since the election, I've attended several investment management and other area conferences, in person and virtual. I've conducted several radio interviews, TV interviews, discussions and roundtable discussions with industry heads, but the financial services industry is vast. There are different mediums, different ways of distribution. So I can't profess to have seen and reached everyone, but what I will say is, and I've mentioned this point a little after the election to industry, is recognizing that government does a lot of work behind the scenes, but perhaps doesn't communicate it as much as they should. So I'm working with Cayman Finance as they work through how they might restructure themselves, and want to toss out an idea to think about is, rather than they will have to have, they're a company that have to have a board of directors managing the business of the company. That's appropriate. But whether or not what should be perhaps created within there is a council of associations. So all the associations come to a round table with the minister and meet periodically, whether it's every 6 weeks, so that we can exchange views on issues and they can hear from themselves the level of engagement. Because I've been on the other side of the industry. The Premier has, many other members of this House have, and if you don't necessarily hear government, you might just assume that nothing's happening. But when the reality is that a lot is happening, but you just sometimes don't have the time to make that turn back to communicate it. So I'll be looking to work with Cayman Finance and maybe all of the key associations to figure out a way in how we can have that roundtable discussion so that information is flowed, because it also enriches the discussion. And the Honorable Attorney General made a suggestion in Cabinet, which I think was a good one, is whether or not, apart from, say, a council of associations, whether there needs to be a separate think tank. Folks who are not in the day-to-day horse race, who are long in the tooth, help pioneer this industry with some other young individuals to think about the next 10 years. So not the current fights, but how we're going to now take our financial services industry and leapfrog it to the next decade. So I have some thoughts in my mind of the individuals who might sort of fit that, who are long Cayman, would lay down in the road for this country, and have them feed in ideas and assist government. Mr. Speaker, actually, I'm not doing too bad on time. But I will say this, because I don't believe in talking just for talking's sake. There are other entities to go through. I don't want to forget Commerce and the wonderful work that the Department of Commerce does. We have some interesting ideas and legislation and new ideas in the future for them. The Parliamentary Secretary for Financial Services and Commerce, the member for West Bay Central, spoke about the statutory authorities and their work. Oftentimes, they can be overlooked because they're not part of the core civil service, but they're still public servants working hard on the front lines. I'd like to thank all of them. I will have a special mention for SEMA in this session when I lay their 2020 report. So I'll leave that, park that for a moment. But I also want to mention, or maybe just piggyback on the Parliamentary Secretaries for Financial Services and Commerce comments on the Maritime Authority. This is a future growth strategy. We are going to fund a National Maritime Secretariat, and that can also drive commercial growth in the area of maritime, which, when you think about it, we should have done a long time. We come from a seafaring history. It doesn't make sense that we haven't tried to commercialize the maritime in the sea. It's exciting opportunities there. There'll be legislation, which is a massive piece of legislation, the Merchant Shipping Act, but that will also present opportunities. Also, the Civil Aviation Authority. I don't know if anybody has ever got a chance to see their work, but it is amazing the level of clientele, the level of due diligence that they have of folks who are on their planes flying the Cayman flag. Mr. Richie Smith and his team are incredible, just as Mr. Waltons at the Maritime Authority. And there's also opportunities that we need to look as a country as how we're going to take the Cayman Islands Stock Exchange to the next step. It's been profitable. It doesn't require government resources. But we need to start thinking about, and so far the CEO, former member of this honorable house, Marco Archer, and one of the board members have come forward to the ministry to have just that sort of thought leadership of ways in which we might be able to provide more equity listings that our own people can invest in some of our local businesses and create local economic activity. I'm very excited to be working in that space. So, Mr. Speaker, a number of other points will come forward in the cut and thrust of Finance Committee. But I think suffices to say is that there is, in my view, a real prospect for Cayman having a vibrant economy. I want to thank every staff member in both ministries for seeing the vision. I'd like to thank all of the statutory authorities for their hard work. I feel fortunate to be supported by two outstanding parliamentary secretaries. I tease the member for Savannah and sometimes call her the Queen of Savannah because she seems to be everywhere in Savannah, working on social development, working with our seniors. I am impressed by the level of intellect by the Parliamentary Secretary for Financial Services and Commerce, the member for West Bay Central. I am excited about the projects that will be delegated to her that she's going to lead. I've told both of them that in this capacity, they should know what I know. So if I have to go somewhere, or if, Lord forbid, there's a sickness, they can step right up. But speaking of an absence, there's one point I want to spend a little bit of time on, Mr. Speaker. Although it is a tremendous honor to represent Cayman on an international stage, and let, hopefully, in the eyes of many, see the value of Cayman. I think about it every time I went to a meeting, either as a representative or in this capacity, to ensure that from the little things, that you look neat, that you talk properly, that you engage in diplomacy, because those folks are looking at you as that one example of how your country looks. And one misstep could then tarnish the entire reputation of the country. But it has a drawback, Mr. Speaker. You're then out of your constituency. You're out of Cayman. So I want to spend a few moments on West Bay South, and I promise it's tied to the budget. There was an unexpected surprise, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to tell the country that one of the things that I didn't look forward to and didn't think I'd relish as part of the electoral process was campaigning. I saw it as a potentially unpleasant experience that was a means to an end to get to work on policy. I couldn't be more wrong, Mr. Speaker. It touched me. You begin to connect with your people in a real visceral way. You begin to understand their problems. You begin to talk with them. You learn things from them. You pay attention. You learn history. You learn things about potentially in the future. You learn things about the past that could help you with the future. You learn things that your granddaddy did that maybe you're not so proud of, but you sit and listen. You learn something that maybe your grandmother did that's something to be proud of. It is kind of a surreal feeling to walk into somebody's house and they took a look at you and say, yeah, I just wanted to see if you look like your granddad. Okay, you got my vote. It's surreal. It brings you back to your past. I truly enjoyed it. So my point is, when I'm out of the country or even here in Parliament, I miss them. I miss West Bay South. And if our plans come to fruition and we're able to lower the cost of living, and I can actually afford to comfortably move back to buy property in West Bay South, I'll be moving back. My wife is ready for it. We made a compromise through marriage that with her Savannah blood, to be nearer to the family when we got married. I think I put my time in, and I think once we can comfortably afford it, you get those affordable houses going, Planning Minister, get back to West Bay South. Easy with Salt. We'll see about Salt Creek. Now, but what that means is to be on the spot. And I'm so proud of our West Bay South constituency office and how they handle things during the day for me, and all of the, I used to call them campaign team, but my committee and my team, the soldiers. It's awesome to be supported. But it means working. It means listening to that constituency feedback and bringing results. So it's a pleasure to be able to take a drive through West Bay South and West Bay Central with the planning minister and looking at roads that need to be identified that have been plaguing people, pedestrian cross signs that need to be put up. So we could talk all day long about global tax, but if you're not getting a chance for the child to cross the road safely between the parking lot and church, you're not doing your job. We need to address areas that are potentially low-line flooding because of development. There are stalwarts like Mr. Kem Jackson that every time he sees me, you're gonna get to that flooding? I'm telling you, you don't do something with those roads, it could flood. We need to listen to their feedback. These are people who have given their lives in this community and importantly know what they're talking about. We need to finish and beautify St. Mary's Cemetery on Willie Farrington Drive. We've started. We've put, again, supported by the planning minister, we've put down gravel. I mean, this is where people are coming to rest their loved ones for eternity. They have to be able to visit there and know that it's happening with dignity. Mr. Speaker, you and I attended a funeral there not too long ago. We can do better. We have to beautify that cemetery. And I'm very pleased so far with the reaction of the planning of PWD, jumping to the scene and looking and saying, yeah, Minister, yeah, we missed this one. We got to get this one right. Mr. Speaker, you have been around long enough to know that no minister gets everything he or she wants from a budget. But do I feel that I pushed the Minister for Finance enough for adequate funding so that the mission that the ministry staff and the departments and I have in our head has a chance of coming to fruition? I do, sir. But it's a serious point because the vision is modernized social assistance, an island of innovation with new veins of investment that are holding and branching off from a globally respected financial service center of excellence that's a global partner to the world. That's Cayman. That's where we're going to be. We're going to get past these stumbling blocks. There will be medicines. There will be protocols. There will be things to learn. We're going to get past this. This is nothing for us to continue to quibble about and not recognize how we're looking. From my perspective, from just traveling, listening to what other jurisdictions are having to go through, I'm happy to come home, even with the current challenges. We have to look at things in relative terms. Yes, we have to debate. Yes, we have to try to find solutions. But, Mr. Speaker, the Cayman Islands is blessed, and I'm proud to call it home. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, I'm ready to work with this team of independents and constructively across the aisle to take the good ship Cayman from strength to strength. So help me God, Mr. Speaker, with the support of this team of free thinkers, we will bring forward transformative change. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, I'm ready to work with this premier. I'm sure in all of our lives, there are non-blood related persons that you might consider a mentor. A point where the bond grows so strong, you think of the person as either an aunt or an uncle. There's a few persons in that life that fit that category for me, and the Premier is one of them. The member for Newlands, is that cleared up for you? We have been in some policy and legislative predicaments. We have helped each other personally. We have successfully been able to navigate those predicaments, even when sometimes we have a difference of opinion on them. But I know exactly where his heart is. I know he doesn't sleep as adequately as he should. He doesn't eat the way that he should, because he spends his every waking moment thinking about this country, its problems, how we're going to solve them, and move it forward in advance. I said it to you before, in my capacity as a civil servant, that I thanked you for your service, but I'm so excited to see you move forward and lead this team. And I'm quite frankly tired of saying the PAC government with some sort of snicker of illegitimacy. We're the government, full stop. With every seat now that has an occupier. All independents, thinking about it. So yes, I respect where everybody else is, that's fine. We all made our choices. But it is what it is, and we have to move forward and think how all 19 members are going to be able to move this country forward into the next decade. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, thank you, God bless you, and God bless the people of the Cayman Islands.
We will take the lunch suspension at this time, and we will come back at 2 o'clock. The House is suspended until 2 p.m.